Well, the only way out of this, I think, is to, it takes courage, because you have to turn your back on your culture in the most profound sense there is, because there are many ways to turn your back on your culture. I mean, if everyone's wearing gray, you can wear green. That's one way to turn your back on a culture. But another way is to break its laws. Now, that's a little more serious and, you know, brings in big philosophical issues. But in fact, the culture is an enormous arrow pointing, go this way. And you know what lies that way? Impoverishment, madness, degradation, and death. That's where the culture is pointing. You can see it. You can see it. Just look where we're headed. If everyone on earth aspires to the kind of lifestyle that you people can enjoy by virtue of having paid the money to be at a scene like this, there isn't enough glass, metal, and plastic in the planet to make that many Celicas and jaguars and bluebirds and snowbirds and all the rest of this crap. So what is needed is an awakening. Now, I mentioned earlier in this talk that in the 50s, before they interfered with LSD research, they were curing chronic alcoholism with a single 500 gamma dose of LSD. Well, now, for heaven's sake, nobody is suggesting that LSD is a cure for alcoholism. That, to me, is absurd. It's not a cure for alcoholism. It's a cure for stupidity. And a person who is killing themselves by drinking themselves to death takes 500 mics of LSD and says, what a stupid person I am. I'm killing myself. And so then they look at their behavior and they cease that behavior. And this is what has to be done on a societal scale. And it is not as difficult as we may wish to be assured by the establishment. The whole falderall and hoop-de-doo about the 1960s was that the crypto-fascist bullshit agenda was damn near overthrown by a bunch of 19 and 20-year-olds on campuses scattered around the high-tech world. The male-dominant agenda is so fragile that any competitor is felt as a deadly foe. And the fact that these ideas will not die, in spite of the fact that, you know, they've raised the price of an ounce of weed from $15 to $500. They've made the pinch for growing weed from a slap on the wrist to lose everything you ever owned or dreamed of owning. And they cannot push it into extinction. It's because it's so much older than their con game. They've invented their con game post-Sphinx or something, and we're talking about a reality that reaches back 15, 25, 30,000 years. And it's a reality, so far, I've only spoken, I keep trying to get to this subject, but I won't let myself for some reason. So far, I've spoken of it as boundary dissolving, promoting group sexual activity, this and that and the other thing, but those are like generalizations. What is really interesting about the psychedelic experience is it shows you a mental universe that you not only never suspected existed, but that you could not have suspected existed. I don't think there's another way to it. I mean, I'm not ready to categorically say there's no other way to it. And occasionally, especially at gatherings like this, people grab me and assure me there are other ways to it. And they say, you know, if you just, I want you to meet Babaji. He's as good as psilocybin. And, oh, really? I want to meet this man. because I mean, let me say a little bit more about this. I would like to believe that in principle you could get to these places on the natch. Only in principle, however, because if some people say, well, you know, these things you describe on DMT and psilocybin, I can show you how to do that naturally. No, thank you. Are you kidding? Thank God I have the drug as a kind of marker so that I know when I'm getting close to that stuff. If I woke up one morning in that place and I couldn't tell myself I'd taken mushrooms, I would define myself as seriously discombobulated and wait to see what happens, you know? And people say, well, don't you think you ought to be able to do it by yourself? And I love this question because the answer is you can't do it by yourself. That's the entire message of the last 10,000 years of human history. The self is insufficient. The ego will not suffice. The only way you're ever going to get anywhere is you must humble yourself to the point where you admit that you can't do it unless you have help from someone whose idea of home is a cow flop. If you're willing to humble yourself to that degree, then maybe we can get somewhere. The content of the psychedelic experience is, I believe, relating to that is the sum total of our humanness. And I think, based on experience, that there is a certain amount of leakage from the future backward into the past, and that many of the phenomena that are being interpreted as past lives and reincarnation and channeling and regression this and clairvoyant that, all this has to do with a misunderstanding about how causality actually works. That all of the impressions upon which people are building these models, channeling and spirit guides and reincarnation and so forth, the material upon which these models are being built is real, but the models that are being built are tremendous compressions of the reality of the situation. I mean, when someone tells me that they experienced a past life regression and that they were a butcher in 13th century Florence, I always think to myself, but you were a butcher in 13th century everywhere. And you were a butcher in 14th century everywhere. I mean, once the connection is opened, the connection is not particular. The connection is general. It is all reality is who you are. All reality is where you are and where you've been and where you will be.